Right now, we don't have the confidence to be able to say to someone, if you don't like us and if you want to kill our people, no one should get on the train in the morning and feel afraid that someone might blow themselves up. We've got to have the courage to say, come on board or farewell. Young guys in Blackburn said to me, I can't go to the Asian part of Blackburn because I'll get jumped. It is a barrier in their mind. There are no-go areas in this country.
Ed Husain, author of Among the Mosques. Hello.
Hi,
How's it going?
Hi, great to meet you.
There's your book.
Thank you, Oli.
Let's start. What's your book about? I mean, in the context of what has been a fairly ferocious weekend, in the discussion of it, piece in the Daily Mail, that provoked a lot of discussion. We'll come to it. But in your own words, what's this book about?
This book, for me, is about the future of Britain. It's not about Muslims, and it's not about mosques, and it's not about targeting any minority community. It's about the kind of country that we, our children, our grandchildren will inherit. And I'm concerned about the future of the country because currently we have a Muslim population of about 4 million, and that's the demographic that's growing most. By the year 2050, according to the Office for National Statistics projection, we'll have about 13 million Muslims. Now that in and of itself is not a problem. Muslims being here, rightly to be welcomed. Muslims have been here for at least 600 years. Muslims have been trading with Britain going back to King Offa in the 760s. So that's not the problem. The problem is the kind of Muslim communities, in the plural, that are emerging. And I just say one thing to you, and I end this answer, and that is that currently with a population of about 4 million Muslims in the UK, we've seen radicalization come out of sections. The vast majority of Muslims are peaceful, law-abiding patriots. That's why they're here, because they love this country and they want to be here. But there are small, I think Gramsci said, a disorganized majority can be controlled by an organized minority. And we're seeing an organized minority who've produced almost kind of 42,000 terror suspects, which are under MI5's watch. That's serious. And if Muslims and more mosques emerge without that cancer uprooted, then what we're looking at is something much more serious for the future of our country. So the book is really about the future of Britain. And by extension, when we're thinking about the future of Britain, to my mind, we are thinking about the free world, because we are the pioneers of the ideas, the institutions that have given birth both to the United States of America and to some extent the European Union. So this country fundamentally matters for world order.
What was your method of research? How did you go about writing this?
I went to the largest mosques in the country and the largest concentrations of Muslims in the land. So I made one exception to that, which was the East London Mosque. But other than that, I went to Manchester, Birmingham, Yorkshire, parts of the country where there's a large concentration. And most importantly, there is a large kind of central mosque. And when most Muslims gather at that mosque, so let's take Regent's Park Mosque on a Friday at 12:30, the mosque is packed with thousands of worshippers, and they're all there to listen to the Imam's sermon. It's a central communal event of the week. So I went there at that time to the largest mosques to hear the sermon, and then meet people, go to the bookshop, follow the crumbs. I think Orwell did something similar in his Road to Wigan Pier. Yeah, so I got on my bike, as The Economist said in their review, and just went out there and met people and observations of communities. And wherever the recommendations came. So I'll give you an example. When I was at a mosque in Manchester, they said go somewhere else. So I went somewhere else. In Rochdale, they said go somewhere else, and I went to that somewhere else. So I was led by conversations and data, rather than having a strict academic, paralyzing method that stops you from asking questions.
That's exactly what I was getting to. Is it kind of a self-selecting sample by attending on a Friday, as you mentioned, 12:30, so of those 4 million Muslims in the UK, the vast majority at work at that time, aren't they? Or indeed, compared to other religious groups in the UK, a lot of Christians in the UK don't attend church on a Sunday. So by focusing on the Friday prayers, is it possible to draw broader conclusions from that smaller sample size?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really good question, Oli. I could have said, no, I'm going to go and speak only to Uber drivers, or only to postal workers, or only to NHS nurses, or only to lawyers, or only to people who work at British Airways, because many of them are from a Muslim background. But I think most people know what goes on in those conversations. They know that the local newsagent is a nice Muslim guy. They know the local curry house is run by a Muslim guy. They know what the conversation is there, and I'm not bringing anything new. Who wants to know what goes on in the post office on a... but people don't know what's going on in those mosques. I think that's why it's important. And people also don't understand why there are so many domes and minarets from Hounslow to Slough to Nelson to, why is the landscape changing? Should I be worried? And it's to address the unknown, but it's also something that worries me, that unless we do this, there are fascists and racists who are waiting to keep pointing at those unknown places and say, we don't know what's going on there, these are real problem places. And that's just not true. The vast majority of those places are, as I say, run by people who are patriots, law-abiding, love this country, and that's why they're here.
So, in your view, what do you think those mosques, the ones you visited, what are they representative of? What do they point to?
It's a mixed picture. So, my favourite mosque was the mosque in Belfast. Where I thought, because there are Catholic and Protestant tensions, that would be a mosque where there were lots of kind of sectarian issues. But Muslim communities there have decided to go the other way. They said, we're not going to be like this. So you walk in the mosque and there's a real sectarian mix, and there's a real racial mix, there's a real ethnic mix, which is healthy because people don't see themselves only as Muslims. They see themselves as part and parcel of a wider country, not just as a Muslim community, but as citizens of a country. That's the important bit that worried me in many mosques, where country did not come first, community and sectarian identity came first. The second thing that I saw in the Belfast mosque, and I want to see in many more mosques, is that it was a mosque run by women. Most of the mosques I visited were not run by women. And that worries me, that why can women be CEOs and indeed prime ministers, but they can't run a mosque? I'm not saying go be a cleric. That's a debate the Church of England has had to have. That's a debate that's live in Catholicism and Judaism. So it should be a live debate within Islam, and I'm not passing clerical judgment. I'm just saying women can be CEOs, chairwomen, fundraisers of mosques. And I didn't see that, but I did see it in Belfast. So those are some of the issues. But what worries me more fundamentally is that in several mosques, there is almost a culture of we will have our own laws away from the English common law tradition. So if I go in to get married, or if the imam comes to get me married, he signs a piece of paper and says, here you go, you're married. And my wife and I are now supposed to be in marital union. The fact is we're not. If I wanted to divorce my wife, I can just say you're divorced 3 times and I walk away. The Indian government last year banned that. In our country, most women who are in those kind of, it's called a nikah arrangement, then have no legal recourse. The judge throws out the case because it's cohabitation and not marriage. So those Sharia courts that I see in several mosques are something that worries me, because a parallel legal system is being created. And that's not healthy for Muslim women, and it's not healthy for our country, and it's most certainly not healthy for men who are upholding misogynistic practices and gives them more power in the balance of power in a relationship. So those are some of the observations, but I can go on if you wish me to talk about why mosques, I think, generally are places of peace. Generally, when I walked into the mosque, say in Rochdale or in Blackburn, or indeed in parts of Bradford, those are cold parts of the country, and I was there during the winter, and you walk in and the mosque is warm and there's food there and the carpet's thick. And many mosques are shelters for homeless people. They provide food for the local homeless without discriminating on faith. And for the vaccine program during COVID, many mosques open their doors. So there's lots of good there. And I think most importantly for mosques, they are a reminder of God, of divinity, of beauty, of purpose, something beyond ourselves. And that's why they're an important national presence. But we've got to get the wrong elements right before we continue on our national journey to a better place.
Yes, and it's interesting because you admit yourself in the book, there are multitudinous positive elements to Islam's story in the UK. Mayor of London Sadiq Khan, politician with the highest personal mandate of anyone in the country, a Muslim. The England cricket team playing at the moment. Muslims have been a part of that team for a long time. As the author, by not necessarily focusing on those stories, by not including them, do you think that contributes to your narrative in a certain way? How does it contribute to your narrative?
I think by not talking about... Well, in some ways I do actually. I mean, for me, Sajid Javid is a big hero, and Sajid endorses the book. And I like Sajid because he comes from Rochdale. And I went to Rochdale and I met kids in the mosque and I met the imam in the mosque, and they're very proud of Sajid Javid. And I think that's the way we should be, that here are children who looked at Sajid Javid, who they knew that he was a Tory party leadership contender, and they look up to him, and that's nice. So people like Sajid Javid feature, other politicians, locally elected politicians feature. But I also worry about politicians who want to come into the public domain as Muslims and identify only as Muslims. They are there not because they're Muslims. I went to one politician's surgery, who I shall not name, in Manchester, who appears in the book, and it was in a kind of Muslim institution, and others felt uncomfortable in going there. Now, you can criticize others for feeling that discomfort, but you're not in a secular institution, i.e. Parliament. You're not in secular politics, i.e. British politics, because Tony Blair famously, my old boss, he was faithful, but he kept it private. Theresa May is faithful, and she keeps it private. We're here in this juncture in our history because the moment you bring religious identity and religious policy making and religious public imagination to the public sphere, others want to do the same thing, and then you're back into the 30 Years' War, the religious wars, and you're back into the pre-Reformation, pre-Enlightenment world. We've travelled through that. And this is part of the problem, that many Muslims haven't had that education and that conversation in our schools because we're afraid of our history. We don't want to talk about the Tudors, we don't want to talk about the Reformation, we don't want to talk about why religion in this country is something that informs our inner dimension, and it's there in the public domain with the Queen as the head of state and head of the Church of England. But we don't shove it down people's throats. We don't blame women if they're wearing the wrong clothes because they've been raped, because we believe in public freedom. In private, we may think homosexuality is a sin and disapprove because some religious teachings are in that domain, but it doesn't mean then you forbid gay marriage or you forbid gay people's freedom or you preach to them. So I think that's important, that we maintain the public domain as a secular contract informed by religious ethics in the public domain. That's why politicians come in and say, I'm the greatest Muslim politician. I think, no, you're the greatest British politician. Get over the constant wearing of the religious identity. We are loyal. I mean, my doctoral supervisor, Sir Roger Scruton, used to say this all the time. We are loyal to this land, we love its history, we love its liberties, and we uphold its responsibilities. And millions of Muslims died, by the way, in defense of this country. Religion is a public and secondary identitarian factor that should not be front-loaded.
Okay, so this is interesting because you advocate for the importance of group feeling in terms of reviving British patriotism, that kind of political project. And when you see similar in your book in terms of Muslim solidarity, you describe that as Caliphism. What's the difference?
The difference is, with Muslim solidarity, you undermine the nation state. You look to a global identity of 1.8 billion people who want a single empire and a single leader. That narrative is out there, and if you doubt me, listen to what's coming out from Turkey and listen to what's coming out from Iran. And we can't have British Muslims, now 5 million, by 2050 at least, 15 million and more, who have issues around loyalty, not to the land and the people and the laws that protect us, that we fight for, that defend us, but we're constantly focused on foreign issues. And the moment that bond breaks, nothing holds us together. We're back to medieval times where there are crusades, where one community hates another community, where there's a global Christian identity, global Jewish identity, I don't know, in the modern world, maybe a global gay identity, global black identity, and then we're all fighting each other as tribes. We've achieved something by saying, after the Enlightenment, in multiple countries, including, by the way, Muslim countries, there was an Enlightenment process where we are citizens of a nation state and we all cooperate with the world with the fundamental organizing principle, that's the nation state. You remove that and we're back to the tribal identities and we fight each other. So Muslims have a spiritual identity, of course, as do Catholics, as do Jewish people, as do Hindus and Sikhs. I mean, that's all fine, but the primary bond between us is one of love and loyalty to this land in which we were born, in which we will die, in which we will be buried. And those civic purposes join us together.
It's quite alarming to hear you say that, because historically, We have heard this dual nationality kind of trope deployed before, and it was used in Germany about the Jews. People were concerned that they had a higher allegiance to something that wasn't Germany. What's the difference?
The difference is that we are not Germany. The difference is that German nationalism was always about blood and ethnicity. The difference is that in the English-speaking world, love for your country comes from ideas and ideals and values and history. I could live in Germany. For 50 years, I'd never be German. But I can live in America or Canada or Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and I can be any of those nationalities. Because our nationalism is an inclusive nationalism. It's an invitation to come on board, support the country, support its values, support its people, and love this land and its laws. And that's why the Americans are so successful, because they can bring in people and make them American. And we should be able to do the same thing. And I think people like Sajid Javid and others that we just spoke about do exactly that. And Boris Johnson, I mean, what, is a great-grandson of a man who memorized the Quran in Turkey? I mean, he's got Greek heritage, his former wife was Indian, his current wife is Catholic. I mean, that's the best of British to me. And you don't get that in Germany. You know, so British patriotism doesn't threaten anybody. It wants to look after its own and invite others to who we are, the inheritors of a common law tradition. Preserve this for this generation and the next and pass it on. Where for the Germans, it's exclusive, no amount of Jewish integration. Jewish people were contributing to at the highest levels in art, music, architecture, drama, and yet the writings of Adolf Hitler and his mentors were always about these are a people apart. They can never be us because they look different. And that's not something we have here. So with all respect, Oli, I think we should not compare ourselves to the Germans.
Is it ahistorical to suggest that British patriotism, British nationalism is bloodless? I mean, in the context of the British Empire, for example, to suggest that that is a bloodless expansion of British nationalism is...
No, I'm not saying it's bloodless. I'm saying it's, our form of national loyalty is not about blood. It's not about race. It's not about ethnicity. It's about learning the language. It's about reason, individualism, gender equality, openness, uniqueness of who we are as a people, and racial parity. You sign up to those values and you're fundamentally part of this land and its people. You can do that till the cows come home in Germany, but you will not be German. And there's a big difference. And I hear this from my friends in Germany who are from a Turkish heritage. They're still seen as Turks 4 generations onwards.
Do you think your own, I mean, as much as anyone can be objective about something, how much have your own views been influenced by your experiences of radicalisation in your youth? What's that informed in your book?
Yes, it's given me an antennae to see where the problems are. I think it's a bonus. I think it's an advantage to be able to walk into a mosque and identify literature that radicalised me and my generation now, rather than wait for another 15 years and see another 40,000 people added to the terrorism list. It's an advantage for me to walk into Didsbury Mosque and identify, this is Sayyid Qutb's brother, Muhammad Qutb, who advocated suicide bombings and jihad, now being taught in Didsbury, and Salman Ubaidi, who killed so many people at the Ariana Grande concert, prayed at this mosque, and guess what? There was a funeral on the day that I visited there for Mohammed Morsi from the Muslim Brotherhood that produced the extremism. Now, you take in someone who hasn't had that exposure to radicalisation, they would just walk past those books and say, no. Collection of books looks nice. So I think that's the big difference. I think it's an important insight. I also feel personally, I think that because of that experience, I don't want others to waste 3 or 4 years of their lives walking a radicalised pathway. And I think Shamima Begum would say exactly the same thing to you. Here's a 16-year-old or 15-year-old that went off from the part of the country where I come from in East London and now wants to come back to Britain. So it's, in many ways, we're issuing a strategic warning based on our own experiences and what we're seeing as to where we are headed as a country.
It's interesting, yeah. Well, two points there. I've read Sayyid Qutb. It was taught to me as part of my politics course. It's not necessarily having the presence of the literature indicates one thing. I mean, I'm here. And I haven't blown myself up yet, although we'll see. On Shamima Begum, there's a part of the book where you suggest that you suggest there are 3 options, basically. And if British Muslims don't basically modernise and integrate, that there's a risk of deportation. That's what you allude to. I think you actually say it explicitly. Outside of the obvious difficulty of where do you deport someone who's British, where do they go to, is revoking a British passport holder's passport because of how they think a tolerant attitude?
No, it's not about how they think, it's about how they behave. And being a British passport holder, where's the Britishness if you hate your people so much you want to kill them? What do you do with large numbers if they emerge in the coming years? That no amount of de-radicalization, no amount of imprisonment, no amount of conversation and invitation to come on board the British nation works, that they're constantly plotting and planning to kill. And if those numbers emerge at significant rates, given the current trajectory, I'm not saying we deport. I'm saying we should be able to say that if you don't like it here, if this country is not your home, you don't feel like you belong here, please go where you feel is your home. I mean, if it's Afghanistan, if it's parts of Iraq, if it's parts of whichever part of the world that you think you ought to go to, we should say, if you don't like it here, please leave. No one's forced to stay here. This is a free and open world. You can leave, that's fine. Right now, we don't have the confidence to be able to say to someone, if you don't like us and if you want to kill our people, no one should get on the train in the morning and feel afraid that someone might blow themselves up. Someone might insult them for being gay or feeling Jewish. I mean, ask our friends in North London how they feel about convoys coming down from Bradford saying rape the Jewish women. No one should feel like that in this country. If you don't like it, if you don't like the pluralist country that we have, please leave. And we should be free to say that. And unless we do, they sniff weakness on our parts and they will continue to exploit that weakness. We've got to have the courage to say, come on board or farewell.
In the context of, let's take Shamima Begum as an example, young girl leaves the UK, travels to marry an ISIS fighter, or any other, person who's committed a horrific act. Surely there is no answer to that includes we revoke your British citizenship. Your membership of this nation is a higher truth, a higher power that is unassailable. In the context of serial killers in the UK, Shipman, West, we don't revoke their citizenship. We commit them to the justice system. We have approved procedures for dealing with these things.
And that's exactly what we're doing at the moment, with tens of thousands of young radicalized extremists who are in prison. We're doing exactly this. But given the rate of radicalization, given the increase, and given the numbers that we're looking at in the decades ahead, we can't just say we'll continue to fill our prisons where they radicalize each other. And we can't just sit back and allow for large parts of Birmingham, Leicester, Keighley, Rochdale, Manchester, Walsall, parts of Glasgow, to become hubs of people who hate this country. And the vast majority of the people in that part of the world currently are not there, part of the country rather, are not there yet. And we've got to wake up and realise this is just staring at us in the face. And we've got to have a series of options, which includes, if you don't like it, and if you think that parts of Pakistan are a better option, kindly go back to Pakistan, the land of your grandfathers, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 generations ago. That's where we're heading. And people here who enjoy the liberties and the freedoms also have rights and responsibilities. It's a two-way contract. You have liberties as an individual, and you have responsibilities as an individual, not as a group. So all the criminals and murderers you alluded to, they were all individuals, and we should take out every legal measure to protect individuals. But when you see large groups organising and mobilising in the millions against Hindus, Sikhs, gays, black people, Jewish people, moderate Muslims, at some point you've got to say, guys, if this place is so intolerable, how about we explore another place that you actually would want to go and reside in?
You position yourself in opposition to the likes of Tommy Robinson, the EDL. Two things here. Does your book not play into their hands by alluding to and supporting their narratives? And secondly, the rhetoric you've kind of just espoused there, if you don't like it, leave. You would hear that at a Tommy Robinson demo. What's the difference?
There's a big difference. Tommy Robinson thinks Islam and Muslims are a fundamental problem. I don't. I'm a Muslim and I don't want to see my faith and my country go in a direction that puts both at collision. He wants to see collision. I want to see the total opposite. I want to see reconciliation. I want to see peace. I want to see belonging. I want to see integration. And I want to see Muslims doing what they're doing, loving and fighting this country fighting for this country, rather. Tommy Robinson doesn't say, if you don't like it, leave. Tommy Robinson takes up violence and fights, and there's a hatred in his conduct. He's a violent man. I'm calling for peaceful dialogue, engagement, debate. So we come to a position where we don't have separate legal systems. We don't have discrimination between our citizens. He wants discrimination to continue. I think there's a big difference. I quite frankly don't like the the comparison and the contrast with someone who's openly racist and fascist. I mean, the book is the total opposite. I mean, you'll see there's a lot of love. I mean, for me, I describe it as a love letter to England, because it comes from a place of love for the country. You know, my father came here from British India, you know, and I've got 2 daughters, and I don't want them to be in a country that's constantly at odds with who they are, and that there are communities telling them to behave otherwise. We are citizens loyal to the country first and foremost. Community is a faith-based private identity that shouldn't enforce disintegration and conflict.
I alluded to this at the beginning of this interview. Daily Mail reporting over the weekend. Do you believe that there are no-go areas for white British people in this country?
There are no-go areas in the minds of people, and that's a no-go area that we should end. It's in our minds. The belief that the young guys in Blackburn said to me, you know, I can't go to the Asian part of Blackburn because I'll get jumped, is a barrier in their mind. I could quite easily walk them into those places, and they should be able to roam around this as part of their country. But this is a barrier that we've created in our mind, and that's the battle of the minds that we've got to open up for all of our people and say there are no-go areas in this country. The whole country is yours, and you should be able to roam wherever you want. And those, similarly in the minds of Asian and white people, that they don't believe, Asian and Muslims and others, that they don't belong in the countryside, that they can't go horse riding, that they can't roam parts of the English countryside because they're somehow different. They too should not feel it's a no-go area for them in the country. This country belongs to all of us, and we should be able to share it as citizens who love it and are loyal to it.
What do you say to the Daily Mail then, who wrote up your book in the way that they did?
Speak to me before you write articles about the book. I mean, I think it was fundamentally wrong to just, take out bits literally out of context. I mean, it's a 400-page book with over 115,000 words, and you just write all that up in a few words and put it out there and reinforce the no-go areas in our minds, because that's where they belong. They're in our minds, and that's got to go. So, hopefully we can undo some of that in the coming days.
Are you not reinforcing it by quoting someone when they say no-go, by you quoting them and including them in their book?
Well, they said a lot more that I didn't include. I think that was a toned-down conversation, by the way. They said a lot more that, again, in their mind, and that worries them. So, and I also don't think we should censor people to that extent. We should be loyal to the substance of what they're saying. We've come a long way. They don't use the P word. They didn't use the N word. That old ugly racism is gone. Now, if they think they don't belong in parts of the country because of that old racism, we've got to break down those barriers. And I don't know, I just feel that those people also deserve a hearing. Because if we don't listen to what they're saying, at least in acceptable form, what you have is a much ugly form that finds expression from that. And that's why Brexit came about, and lots of us in the south of the country don't understand it, because it wasn't just about the European Union, it was about identity. And you've got to let it out. People have got to be able to say it and find expression and a voice for it in its acceptable form. I mean, obviously, if you're swearing, if you're using the N word, P word, then no. Those kind of things were taken out because I think it's just unacceptable.
In the context of what you've just said, you'd accept there's a role of, well, poverty has played a role, discrimination, racism has played a role, as much as religion has in the issues that you're talking about here. You'd accept that?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really, no. Because I mean, poverty, discrimination. Why is it that someone who comes here from, say, Ethiopia doesn't walk the pathway of wanting to kill or blow themselves up? Why is it that Muslims who come from India here, or Turkey, or Kurdistan, are much more integrated and love this country, or the new cohort of Syrians who've come here, loyal, and love this country. But you know, as I say in the book, I find it astounding that some Muslims who... You know, it's a religious political ideology is the point, that you've taken a theological position to hating someone justified by a rabid and literalist reading of Scripture. It's an ideological problem, because the poverty exists also in Brixton. The poverty exists, you know, for communities from all backgrounds. You know, it's just... I mean, what I'm trying to get at is this: why is it that someone in Mauritania, among the poorest countries in Africa, doesn't walk the path of blowing themselves up, but someone in Saudi Arabia, until recently, was a prosperous country? You know, why is it that Muslims in America, by and large, have strong feelings of belonging, but Muslims in parts of the UK don't? Why is it that someone who's Hindu from India, or someone, you know, increasingly, you know, Hong Kongers, others who are coming here, don't have those same problems? So I just don't think it's about socioeconomics. I don't entirely buy that. I think it's ideological, theological, combination of identity factors that reinforce the path of you kill yourself, you're a martyr, you go to paradise, and those who you've killed are evil disbelievers who are dispensable. I think that's at the core of it.
Ed Husain, questions asked and perhaps to some extent hopefully answered in Among the Mosques.
This is back to you.
Back to me. You've held on to it for the course of our discussion. Out this week. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Oli. I appreciate a candid conversation. Thank you.